Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut channel. In today's video, we're going to be covering essential beginner tools or beginner mechanic tools working on Toyota and Lexus Scion products. These are tools for DIY mechanics or even someone who wants to enter the business working at a Toyota dealership. These are the essential tools that you need to get and things you really need to know about tools. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. If you are a returning subscriber, well, thank you so much for watching another one of my videos, and without further ado, let's dig right into it. First, let's say a brief overview. Folks, tools can get expensive and they really can get out of hand very quickly. So here's my initial advice before we start digging into the specifics. Tools are only as good as the mechanic using them. You could buy the most expensive tool and the fanciest tools, and you see mechanics everywhere. They open their big drawer, and it's all a sea of snap-on and thousands of dollars. But you know who usually that mechanic is? The apprentice, the guy who does brakes, the guy who does basic suspension work, not really the top diagnostician. Because you make the tools work. The tools are supposed to make your life slightly easier, but in the end, the tools don't work on their own. You have to operate them. So don't be consumed by the expensive tools and the professional tools, and I'm gonna overpay for this, and I'm gonna overpay for that. I'm gonna have all these fancy tools that are filling up this giant toolbox. This doesn't get you anywhere. You and your knowledge and your experience gets you places, not the tools and how expensive they are. I really need to say that because I see this mistake over and over. Let's start with the first tool recommendation. Let's start with the basic hand tools you're going to need. And let's specifically talk about the types and sizes. So if you're working on a Toyota or Lexus, everything will be metric. There is no standard. That is just the way it is. Also, in metric, you're not going to use some sizes you'll never use on a Toyota. So perhaps this is a way for you to look, should I buy this set or this set? Because I see many people buying a certain set that doesn't have the sizes you need, but have every size you don't need. So let's start with the basic sizes first. These are the sizes of in millimeter that Toyota uses in all their cars. They really don't use other sizes. You're going to start with your 8 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 12, 14, 17, and 19. Then we jump up to 21, 22, 24, some 27, and then 30 and 32. You are rarely going to see any other sizes than these. And I know that seems like a giant spectrum, but let's break it down. Tools, sockets, let's talk about sockets. 1/4 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch. You're never really going to use 3/4. We're not talking about giant trucks here. So these are the three sub sizes you're going to use. On the 1/4 inch side, you're going to want that 8 to 14. You're rarely going to use a 17 or 19. It's just not going to happen. You rarely find these. So any set you buy 1/4 inch, whether it's shallow are the small ones, deep are the deeper ones for like going over a stud, or swivel. We're going to cover on swivel a little bit. You're going to want them to cover 8, 10, 12, 14, at least in the set. They'll have different sizes, which you'll probably never use, but these are the sizes you're going to need to have in a set before you buy it. Moving on to 3/8. On 3/8, this is your most heavy-duty use. These are the ones you're going to use the most. You're going to need basically 8, 10, 12, 14, 17, 19. It's a must. Plus, there's just one size that you're going to need a little higher, kind of a jump, is the 24 and 3/8. With these sizes, with just these two sets right here, and maybe this one, you could take apart half the car, if not more. A lot more, actually. On the 1/2 inch, now this is, when you get into the 1/2 inch, things start getting expensive because the 1/2 inch are bigger, the impact ones are really expensive, and this is where things get a little expensive. On the 1/2 inch size, you want 17, 19, 21, 22, 24, 27, perhaps, 30 and 32. These are the only sizes you need, and honestly, when you get into the bigger sizes, this is where things are going to fall off. There is a few odd situations, like you're going to need a 35 if you're doing a front axle on a 4Runner or a Toyota truck, some of the newer ones, but they're going to be very rarely used. Your main sizes will also be 17, 19, 21, 22, 24. These are the most used ones. Let's talk about the different types of sockets that you're going to want. Please, when it comes to swivels, don't buy this type of socket. It's really not good. It's flimsy. It's terrible. I don't like it. I don't own a single one of them. And they rarely come in handy where you use them. Buy the proper swivel sockets, the ones that look like this. These are proper. They're impact. So we'll get to impact and power tools in a bit. These are the ones that you're actually going to use, that are durable, that really give you those crazy angles to get to places and get the job done. You want the sizes, I recommend actually 1/4 inch. A lot of mechanics don't use the 1/4 inch swivels. They're really helpful in a combination with the tool we're going to talk about. For most tasks that DIY mechanics will do, or beginning mechanics in the industry will do. My favorite set of sockets is the deep. I always use them. I use them a lot. And the only time I use a shallow one is when there is a reach issue where I need something to go in a small space. That's it. Most of the time I use a deep, and I use an impact socket. Yes, they're bigger, they're bulkier, but they really work, and they're strong, and they rarely break, and that's where I lay my heavy use on. The other thing is specialty sockets. Folks, when it comes to specialty sockets, there's the hex, there's the Torx. Let's talk about these briefly. Honestly, when it comes to hex, you want the main ones that you're going to use a lot is 10, 8, 6, and 5. Some of the in-between you might use here and there, but not as much as these 4 sizes. Every set you buy, make sure it has a 5, a 6, 8, and a 10 hex. On the Torx, it seems like they're all over the place. So Torx are not very expensive. Believe it or not, as fancy as they are, they're not expensive. You can buy a bit set that has most of them. Some of the commonly used size, you go as little as 10, 15, T10, T15, T20, T25, and then 30, 35. You're gonna have some 50 and 55s if you go in the trucks, like especially taking the bolts for the bed. But really, that's about it. And now we're talking advanced stuff. These are the kind of tools that I'd recommend you buy only when you get that one job that you're tackling that you needed, but I wouldn't invest in it up front. And when it comes to ratchets, don't go overboard with ratchets. Really, in the 1/4 inch world, you're gonna need something small, even smaller than this. Now this is 3/8. You need something smaller than this, like this length, and that's it. 1/4 inch is usually not high torque. It's just you want to get in really tight spaces. 3/8, you're going to need actually 3 that I recommend. The standard size that probably everybody have somewhere in the toolbox. 1 that is a little bit longer, and a breaker bar. In the 1/2 inch world, only get a giant one. There is a breaker bar, basically take off wheels, hold on stuff, suspension stuff, especially if you're not using power tools. Speaking of power tools, let's dig into that, because this could change your entire trajectory of your tool purchase. So, power tools. And in this, if you haven't bought anything yet and you're looking at this and you're starting your investment slowly in tools, you have a decision to make. Are you going to go the air route, air tools route, or are you going to go the power or cordless tool route? Corded tools, they're really not, they don't really work well, and I don't actually encourage you to buy it because the cars are not tied. You might be working in the street, you might be working here, working there, and you have this giant cord that you're dealing with. It just doesn't work very well. Let's start with the air operated tools, which unless you are a serious DIY mechanic or you're gonna work in a shop or something of that nature, I discourage you from them slightly, because the investment, the initial investment for air tools is much higher than cordless. But there's a trade-off, of course. With air tools, you're gonna need to buy a compressor, and the compressor takes up space, and it is expensive, and it's loud, and it just adds to the complication. Now you need a hose, and you need to drain your tank, and you need to put that water separator, and it just turns into a complication. And then good air tools are expensive. So that's the other problem. On the other side, cordless tools are easier to set up. You basically take them out of the box, plug in the battery, you're good to go. However, the downside of these is the battery, you got to keep an eye on the charge. If it dies out in the middle of a job, now you got to wait for it to charge, and you're kind of stopping everything. So you got to keep an eye on the batteries. And the batteries, even the best ones, eventually will die out. But cordless tools have come up so much, and I'll show you an example in a little bit. They've come up so much over time that they are very reliable, and even professional mechanics, I'm switching over to cordless stuff because they're so much easier to work with, and you don't have to carry this giant air hose and all that mess, and they're just easier, more convenient. Let's start with air tools. And with air tools, you're going to need a few things to start to get you going. You're going to need a 1/2-inch impact. Mainly you're going to use this for big stuff that like wheels, like suspension, big bolts, anything basically 19 millimeter and up. You're going to want to use a 1/2-inch with Toyotas. Then you're going to need a 3/8 impact. Now a 3/8 is going to be your best buddy. All your little stuff, engine work, changing out mounts, light suspension stuff, ball joints, struts, whatever the case may be, you're going to be relying heavily on that 3/8 impact. Additionally, for really small stuff, you're going to need a 1/4-inch air ratchet. And this makes the famous sound of auto repair shop. That really loud, screechy sound that you hear when you drive by an auto repair shop is all made by an air ratchet like this one. And when it comes to brands, and you notice here, this is an Ingersoll Rand, this is an Ingersoll Rand, this is a Mac Tools, which is terrible. I have a problem with Mac Tools, we're not going to get into that here. Ingersoll Rand is the king of air tools. Many people go running, I see the new technicians at my dealership, they go running buying a Snap-on. Snap-on makes terrible air tools. I'm sorry, Snap-on, you make great tools overall, but air tools, nah, they're not good. Ingersoll Rand, actually, most of the other brands, Matco, Mac Tools, even others, they'll buy an Ingersoll Rand, they'll put their name on it. Basically, Ingersoll Rand will make a gun, like an impact gun, to their specifications, but it's actually an Ingersoll Rand. Ingersoll Rand, I'm a fanboy, I'm a little bit of a bias when it comes to this, but Ingersoll Rand is king. They're a little bit on the pricey side, but if you're going to invest for a tool that's going to last you a lifetime, this is it. Let's move on to the cordless side. Now the cordless side, this was my first investment in the cordless, and it was, for lack of a better term, terrible. Absolutely terrible. Again, this is a Snap-on gun. It is horrible. The battery always ran out. It was super expensive, and the battery was even more expensive. I discourage you, more is not better when it comes to cordless tools. Snap-on doesn't make good cordless tools. You gotta look at an industry that has been using cordless tools for a very long time to really find the good ones. The construction business, DeWalt, Milwaukee, and there are many other brands, but these are the ones I use, so these are the ones I'm going to show you. I am on my 4th DeWalt gun, 3/8 impact, very powerful, very strong, very light. Because remember, maybe as a DIY mechanic you're not going to have this problem, but as a professional mechanic, I have every single muscle and nerve issue in my hands that is named in the medical dictionary. So weight, I'm lugging this heavy thing all day long, and impacts shake your hand really bad. So you want something very lightweight, and this is very lightweight. In these, I recommend you get this specific ratchet. This thing, I am on my 3rd one on these because I destroy these a lot because I use them very heavily on engine work. They're usually covered in oil. Yeah, I could take care of them a little bit better, but they're really inexpensive, and I just need to get the job done. And doing a lot of engine work and oil involved, you're gonna burn through these. But usually they last a year or 2 with me. That's just the way it is. I could rebuild them and repair them, but I found they just lose their strength over time, and I end up needing to replace the whole thing. I just buy the bare tool, I leave the batteries, and life is good. Now, the DeWalt is good, 3/8 impact, great. They also make a 1/2-inch impact, which if you really don't want to deal with air-operated tools, that's the one to get for bigger stuff. I also recommend you get a drill. You can use this double as a drill and as a screwdriver or a driver. You can put Torx, you can put Phillips, whatever the bit you get a little cheapo bit set and it'll work fine. So these are the main power tools that you're gonna need. Maybe you'll need a little angle grinder, but this will get you really going and you don't need a lot more than this. Perhaps down the road you want to add an air hammer. I haven't seen a cordless air hammer yet, but an air hammer, if you decided to go the air route, might be beneficial down the road. Let's talk about wrenches. So wrenches is a heavily debated one because everybody has their preference. I'm just going to tell you what works with working with Toyotas. Again, with wrenches, it is the same for sizes. You're going to need 8, 10, 12, 14, 17, 19, not 21. You're actually going to jump right over to 22, 24, 27, 30, and not even 32. So let's talk about the general wrenches that I recommend. I recommend you buy an open end on one side, this is just a standard size wrench, and a ratcheting end on the other, a ratcheting box, preferably with a direction change here and curved. This will really come in handy. Some of them will not have the direction change. You'll just flip the wrench and it'll be straight, it won't be curved. You can get either, but this one works really well because that curve will help you get in tight spaces. And another type of wrench that is really getting popular is the really long wrenches that are boxed on both ends. Now the thing about these wrenches is, on one side you have the open, I hope the camera can zoom in. Do you see how it has that raised section? That really gets in handy, folks. And then the other side is just a ratcheting one. Now this particular set goes all the way from 8 to 25. This is made by Gear Wrench, folks. Initially this started with Matco. Matco invented this in a way and everybody else copied them after the patent ran out. But Gear Wrench makes a really reasonably priced one, which is actually this one. This is the big one that goes all the way to 25. If you want to buy that one, go ahead, but they make a smaller one that goes only to 19, which is cheaper. Folks, these are not expensive. This is also Gear Wrench. This is what I also have at work. Certain things I have that are Snap-on expensive, mainly for alignments, and let's talk about that in a little bit. But the only difference between this and a Snap-on, this is just a piece of metal that's cut out on the open side. Brands like Snap-on and high-end wrenches, they're going to have technology in the head where if the bolt is slightly rounded, it's going to have another lip that grabs it and all this fancy stuff. But for most DIY and beginning technicians, are you going to sink all your money in this for buying a 15 and 18 millimeter and working on Toyotas you're never going to use? So with the expensive wrenches, buy what you need. Don't buy the whole set and sink all your money into this, which most of them you're not even going to need. Same thing with line wrenches. Unless you progress into working on brake lines and lines in general, don't invest in line wrenches because you're rarely going to need them. Really, honestly, I'll just tell you this from experience. I have a very expensive Snap-on set. I rarely use it. Most of the time, most of these lines come out normally with just a regular wrench. So unless you need it, don't just buy tools that you don't need and you might use once every 2 years or not even. Let's talk about the alignment for wrenches. Now alignments, unless of course you need an alignment machine to do that, but I'll give you the sizes so you would know because there's one odd size in here. The lock nut on the front tie rods, there's the lock nut, and actually in the inner tie rod there's a section where you could put a wrench to make the adjustment. You loosen the lock nut, you make the adjustment, then you lock the lock nut. So every model, every Toyota model that has a 19 millimeter lock nut, the inner will be a 14, except certain like second and third generation Prius, it'll be a 13, and this is the only time in Toyota where you'll find a 13 millimeter, or you're going to need a 13 millimeter wrench. Otherwise, there's no 13 millimeter. Now, if you have a 22 lock nut, 22 millimeter lock nut, the inside will be a 15. That's another time where you're going to need an odd size. If you have a, let's say, Sienna, third generation Sienna, the lock nut is 24 millimeter. The inner tie rod is an 18 millimeter. That's where the odd sizes come in. But unless you're doing alignments, you're not going to need those sizes. And then the one size up is the Tundra and Sequoia, the newest ones, the latest generation. They're going to have a 30 millimeter wrench. to undo the lock nut. So folks, with wrenches, don't overspend, buy what you need. 14 millimeters, and 14 and 12 probably going to be the ones you're going to use a lot. 14 being the drain plug. Every single drain plug on a Toyota, except if it's not made by Toyota, like this one and this one, you know, there's going to be a 14 millimeter drain plug. Let's talk about pliers, and briefly, because pliers will come in as you progress in working on cars. And I want to kind of give you the highlights of things that I recommend you get. The long needle noses, especially the curved ones. Folks, I go through these like, I don't know, a lot. I really use these a lot, and I break a lot of them. And this is possibly ones that I use the most for hose clamps, for loosening up hoses, all kinds of stuff. This is ones that I recommend you have. There is a 90-degree bend. You're going to use this, but not as much. Another one is channel locks that you're really going to use a lot, like the ones made by Knipex. They're really good. They actually kind of became like Kleenex. They call them Knipex pliers. They're actually just a brand. They're channel locks, but they're locking. They're really high quality. These are ones that I recommend you look into. You're going to need vice grips here and there, needle nose vice grips, big vice grips. Start here is where you kind of take a step back and buy as you need, because you want to have a few basic pliers, but don't go overboard. Same thing with screwdrivers. You need a Phillips, you need a flathead and a few sizes, but don't go overboard. Buy good ones, because the cheap ones will break immediately and they'll round off your fastener, and that's just not good. Buy decent screwdrivers, but any home will actually have a bunch of screwdrivers laying around, so that is not something. Just don't buy the cheapest one. So there's one tool specific to Toyota that you're going to use a lot, and I recommend it because this is not a simple tool that everybody knows about. It is finally available for general consumption. Snap-on invented these, and they had a patent on it, and they were super expensive. You basically could buy, instead of buying this whole set, you could buy one for the same price. But when their patent ran out, everybody else made the same thing and actually made it better a little bit. We'll talk about this. They're basically a long extension with a wobble. Now, most people will be like, well, why can't I just use my regular swivel? Well, this is thin and you can get it in really tight spaces. Folks, this is a really good tool. It's a little bit on the expensive side when you look at everything else, but this has your 8, your 10, and your 12 and 14. It has other sizes. This is really good. It's made by Gear Wrench. It has, the one thing that was common with the Snap-on one, it had a pin right here that always broke. I mean, I break one probably every month. The Snap-on guy will replace it for me, and we'll talk about brands and all that in a little bit. But this doesn't have a pin. It has kind of a ball design. They're very proud of it in their advertising and marketing. It really works. It's really good. This is one I recommend as you progress, as you have all your basics covered. This would be a nice addition to your tool set. So lastly, let's talk about brands and what brands should you buy. Folks, this is where I don't want to say it's up to you. It's up to you, but here's the recommendations. Expensive tools, Snap-on, Matco, Mac Tools. These are really the brand names. They offer something that DIY mechanics or at home really will not benefit from. It actually will be a hassle for you, if anything. The biggest thing about being a professional is I'm working on a car, customer's waiting, my tool breaks. Well, now I have to physically go to a store, here's my warranty tool, here's my broken tool, warranty it from me, and all this hassle, and they don't carry this, they don't carry that. Well, all these three tools, three tool companies, they actually don't have a physical store where you can go to. They have a truck that comes to the dealership or to the shop, and they replace tools, and all of them are lifetime warranty. Of course, they started that. But as things progress and as we get to the time that we're in right now, there is a lot of tools that are lifetime warranty. One of them for the longest time that really hurt these big three, let's call them the big three, is Craftsman. They made really decent quality tools. and they had lifetime warranty, and they were sold as Sears. So your Sears was everywhere. You could go, warranty your tool, life is good. But the problem is Sears is gone. Now they're an Ace, and their quality really dropped, and to a point where unless you're buying some used Craftsman tool that somebody bought a long time ago, they're not good anymore. But what is replacing them as kind of a mid-range, good quality, but not as pricey as the premium ones, which still have a very good, decent warranty. Most of them are lifetime. You got Husky, sold at Home Depot. There's Home Depot everywhere. I have a bunch of Husky tools. They're really good. I don't remember the last time I broke one, but again, I don't use them as much as I use some of my other stuff, daily use. Gear Wrench is one that's really coming up high because they're really innovating. They're really making good products. Their prices are good, and I don't see them breaking all the time, and I do use some of their tools a lot. And the power tools, we talked about it, Ingersoll Rand for air tools, DeWalt, Milwaukee, and there's probably others, but these are the ones I recommend because I've used them and I know how they are. Just don't get them oily, these cordless power tools, because they'll get ruined on you. I've done that, and that's my fault, but otherwise they're really good tools. And when it comes to sockets and all this basic stuff, Husky is a good brand. Gear Wrench is a good brand. We talked about these two. Another one is if you're buying impact stuff that company's been around for a while, but nobody knows about. Gray Nomadic. They're a really good company. Their prices are decent. They make really good impact stuff, which will come once you start researching them. They're a really good company and make good products. Folks, I will advise you against one thing. Don't buy these pre-made, oh, here's a 239-piece mechanics tool. They're terrible. Usually they're the cheapest quality tools, and they always have 75% of the kit is stuff you'll never use. That's the truth. There are mechanics tool sets put by marketing people. They're not really mechanics tool sets. I don't like them. They're really usually cheap quality. Usually you can buy the same tools from the same company individually, and they'll be different quality-wise. It's like, wait a second, what happened here? So buy your tools individually, not piece by piece, but set by set. Don't buy just one giant set. You're welcome to do that, but as you progress as a DIY mechanic, you're going to start seeing it. You're always running to buy a tool. I'm like, wait a second, I thought I bought this that has everything. Well, it doesn't, because again, it's a marketing thing. So don't fall for that. Buy your tools as you need them in a set that contains all the sizes and configurations that we've talked about in this video. Don't go as much as buying individual sockets because it might be counterproductive, but consider it as an option, especially with like 1/4 inch. You're gonna buy this giant set, and most of it you're not gonna use. It might be cheaper just to buy the sockets that you will need. But again, are you gonna own a Toyota forever? This works really good when you work at a Toyota dealership, but it doesn't work very well if you have multiple brands, and because everybody will be different. We focus on Toyota only here. So finally, folks, before we end the video, I'll tell you this. Tools is a never-ending endeavor. You're always going to be buying tools. There's always going to be new innovations in tools. And yes, the professionals will see this before you will as a DIY mechanic or even as a beginner mechanic. But one final advice is don't overspend on tools. Overspend on your education, on your experience, or on working on cars. I see so many mechanics, especially the apprentices, they start and they spend they're always broke because they spend all their money on these fancy Snap-on tools. You open their top drawer of their toolbox, their very expensive toolbox, it's full of every single socket possible. But you know what? You open the top drawer of my toolbox, this is what you will find. These small number of tools that you see here have taken multiple engines, multiple transmissions, probably in the hundreds if not thousands, and have done everything from simple diagnosis all the way to complete teardown, all the way to a truck frame. It's not about the tools, it's about you and your experience. So don't overspend. This is my final message. Don't be that apprentice that have all these fancy tools and half of them they will never use, because how many tools do you need to do an oil change and a tire rotation? Really. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope this gives you a better idea of if you're just starting out working in your own car, what kind of tools you're going to need, and when you do make these purchases, you can keep this information in mind and make the correct decision to buy which tools you need, so you wouldn't end up overspending on tools you don't really need. If you like this video, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.